And welcome back to the Other 40s Fitness Podcast. My name is Tristan Lowe, and for those of you watching on YouTube, you see me holding up this exotic looking cookbook and these two utensils, and that's a Japanese cookbook and a pair of chopsticks. And the reason that these are in the thumbnail is because I've just returned from a 2-week trip to Tokyo and Kyoto in the fantastic city of Japan, which is the subject of today's podcast episode, and the differences in the 2-week period that I was there that I saw in physical health compared to ours in the UK. Now let's start. Okay, so I flew out to Japan for 2 weeks and spent 9-10 days in Tokyo, 9 days in Tokyo and 4 days in Kyoto. And it was an incredible city, both of them. I suggest if you get the time, the effort and the resources, you should go. What you'll witness firsthand, not what you'll read about or what you'll hear about from a friend, what you'll see for yourself with your own eyes is a startling difference in the quality of self-care, okay, and that's the attention that individuals, men and women, boys and girls, pay to their own physical health, and also the healthcare that the government and I imagine private as well put towards the good citizens of Tokyo and Kyoto, and by extension I imagine the rest of Japan as well. Okay, now what I'd like to do is give you an idea that the eye test, my optics, didn't fail me, and in the 14 days of walking around, wide-eyed at some of the sites, something that I noticed every day from the moment I left my apartment or my hotel out there to the moment I came back in at night time. I was out sometimes for up to 14 hours a day, and there wasn't a 10-minute period that went past when I was reminded of the low obesity rate in Japan, certainly in Kyoto and Kyoto, excuse me. I could count on one hand each week, okay, over the 2 weeks I was there, that I saw someone that I thought to look at that was Japanese, that was grossly overweight or obese or morbidly obese. And I did some research into it after, and there's a multitude of reasons why. There's a cultural reason. It's not in their culture to gorge on high processed foods, fatty foods, unhealthy food over and over again for a 10 to 50 year period. Now you might be saying to yourself, what about sumo wrestlers? Well, I saw the sumo wrestlers firsthand while I was out there, and they're enormous gentlemen. They are enormous people, but they have deliberately ate their way to that, okay, because they are essentially combat athletes who need to put on that weight. But those aside, I would say 95 to 98% of the people I saw from the age of, let's say, certainly from the age of 18 and above, probably right down to the kids as well, were slim, thin, or muscular, or a mix of all three. I hardly ever saw any overweight men or women. And the rare occasion I did, they stood out like a sore thumb. And I mean just to actually look at, not in terms of personality or lifestyle. It almost doesn't exist. Now, when I was out there, I was at least twice a day. I ate out, and quite often the choices of dishes, which are all great, healthy, tasty, and nice to look at as well, and relatively low cost, were fish dishes of different examples. In some places they serve beef, some places it's chicken, but generally you'd have a fish dish, or they would make tofu dishes or things like that, or vegetarian. A lot of ramen noodle places, a lot of soup and what have you, but you'd go out and eat something that would kind of look like this. I'm searching for a page and I found one, ad hoc. Something like that. Take a look at that. Now, you may not like the taste of or the look of raw fish, but let me tell you, when you have it out there, it's cooked by the people who know how to make it, it's great. And I spent some time before I went out there to learn how to the very best of my abilities, to sort of acquire some of their traditions and use chopsticks as well. And I got reasonably proficient at it. Now, what's interesting, when you use chopsticks to eat food, and that would be not just Japan, but China, parts of Asia as well, it takes longer to eat the food. You can't shovel it down really quick. You've got to eat it slow, unless you're just eating rice or noodles. But generally, you pick a small part out each time, and it takes a while to eat the food. A few of my dishes that were warm went cold by the time I finished them, but that's fine. They tasted great. Now, there's a distinct difference between the healthcare system in the UK compared to Japan. And I've looked into it as well, and you can have their version of the NHS, and you can also have private healthcare as well. Now, that's going to help if you've got a illness, an injury, a long-term, an acute or a chronic condition. They can go and see their doctors, or they can go and see their surgeons or their therapists. But equally, I think what was important and what gave me pause for thought, an idea for the video, is their sense of self-care, their sense of self-discipline when it comes to food, when it comes to nutrition. Matter of fact, I actually saw on more than one occasion McDonald's restaurants dotted around, and they were half empty all the time. You know, midday Saturday, midday on a weekday, when you think most people are out eating, or in the evenings. And bearing in mind, Japan's the biggest city in the world with a population of approximately 14 million just in the actual centre. But it's dotted around different cities, and I think the actual the entire region, the Greater Japan area, like we've got Greater London, the Greater Japan area, I think that number goes up to about 33, 34 million. So imagine how many people are in that city alone, and very rarely do you see poor health. Something else I didn't see either, and that was the homeless, of which you can go to most towns and cities in the UK, which are unfortunately, there's always an area where the homeless are, as I suppose a lot of countries and cities and towns around the world. I only saw one homeless person in the time I was there. That was clearly homeless, a vagrant, and that was one too many. But compared to what I see in London, Nottingham, Lincoln, it is such a startling difference, and that's no coincidence. It's not a coincidence that in 2 weeks there, in a city that big with that many people, on only one occasion, I saw someone that was, to my eye, that was visibly homeless. Now, they may have a problem out there with the homeless. I didn't see it. It may be in a certain part of this huge city that I never saw, but I'm only going by what I saw. All right, now, what I noticed as well is that there's a lot of places in Tokyo and Kyoto where you can't smoke, which is just like the UK as well. You can't smoke on buses and trains and whatever, and restaurants and bars, but it was even more so out there. There was hardly any places at all where you could actually stand there and strike up a cigarette or a vape. I didn't see hordes of teenagers smoking and vaping like I do see in Lincoln or in Nottingham or in Sheffield or in London. If it exists, I didn't see it. So at this moment in time, I would say it doesn't exist. What I did see, about once a day, if that, you'd find a room that was purposely built in the middle of the city for people to meet and stand in this one room and smoke. It's the strangest looking thing. You walk past and see a glass door in a building, and it could have like 15 people in there smoking, but you don't see it on the street. Something else as well, the streets of Japan, there are no bins, or as they call them, no trash cans or whatever. There are no waste bins on the streets of Tokyo or Kyoto. Now you think, well, where does all their rubbish go? They take it home, or they leave it after eating and it goes back to the shop where they bought it from. I read about that before I went, but it wasn't until I was out there that I realised it is the cleanest city I've ever been in. And I've travelled in Europe, North America, I've travelled in the Far East. I've never seen a place as clean and as tidy as these cities. And again, these aren't small places, these are enormous metropolises, cities, or whatever you want to call them. All right, now, I'm just going to actually read something out, a short paragraph that I looked up prior to shooting this video, a statistic taken over the last couple of years about the healthcare system in Japan. Now, if I can find it here. Okay, so obesity rates in Japan. The prevalence of obesity, which according to this is a BMI of 30 or more in Japanese adults aged 20 and above, is 3.8% in males and 3.2% in females. Okay, so that's less than 4%, 3.8 and 3.2% of the population of Japan, male and female respectively, that are classed as obese. Okay, and that was done by the National Health and Nutrition Survey in the last few years. It's quite low compared with other countries listed in the global database on the body mass index. Now, how obese are the people of Japan compared to the people of the UK? Okay, comparing ourselves to Japan, which at just 4% or lower has one of the lowest obesity rates of any country in the developed world. This may seem a tall order for the UK, but Dimbleby and others argue that the country offers a salutary position and lesson in how we can come to grips with our own battle against the bulge. Okay, now, is there a penalty for obesity in Japan? The idea is to reduce the ranks of overweight people out there by at least 10%. Well, it's already at 3.2, 3.8%. The government will start fining companies and local governments if they fall below that expected healthcare. Now think about it. The government of Japan have made it clear they will fine companies and they will fine cities or towns if it's found that the people of that company, that workforce, have for one reason or another increased their poor health with being overweight or obese. Now, you may say to yourself, that's a form of control. I would argue, having been there myself and respected their culture and respected their systems and their traditions, I would argue, because I've actually been there and seen it, it's not a form of control, it's a form of self-discipline and self-care and care for their own people. They care for each other as well as care for themselves. Something ordinarily which is not the norm here in the UK. I happen to know that's not the norm. I've been to North America, the USA and Canada that many times. It's the same, if not worse, out there. They do not promote bad health out in Japan. When I saw the billboards, these enormous billboards, the biggest billboards I've ever seen, and when I saw the digital adverts that they use, the TV screens that go across some of the trains out there, and it's high tech as well. You've got these sort of mini wall-mounted iPads, for want of a better word, that are all attached to the inside of the trains promoting adverts, and that could be talking about a new food, a new program on TV, a new clothing brand. So you sat on the train watching if you're not looking at your phone. And not on one occasion did I see them advertise a product, a brand or a service using overweight, unhealthy looking people. I didn't see it once in 2 weeks. Yeah, and that's not to say that it doesn't exist. I'm going by what I saw. And that shows me that they don't promote and champion and praise poor health in the same way that the national TV, the BBC, the ITV, Channel 4, BBC 2, Sky TV, even YouTube, marketing adverts and magazines do in the UK. Yeah, there is a deliberate and distinct a push to promote poor health in the UK, and that is put together by the government, local authorities, marketing agencies and standards, all put together. They all collude together to promote poor health. There's not a minute that goes by when there's an advert, a junk food advert, on the adverts in the UK. You do not see it in the same way in Japan. They always have slim, healthy looking men and women promoting anything from a baseball cap to a pair of chopsticks to a bank, a local high street bank. They make a point of not convincing parents, people of authority and children that it's okay to be unhealthy. They do the exact opposite. Now, you may ask yourself, is Japan a third world country? No, anything but that. Although 70% of the country is mountainous, it's covered in mountains, the huge big cities, they don't promote, and I imagine they don't tolerate poor health. It will exist, but in such a small amount. There's a lot we can learn from the Japanese, and I would say the first thing I learned is their respect of themselves, their own bodies, their own property. Yet again, imagine streets completely clean in the size of cities that are bigger than half the size of some small countries. Every single bus, train, taxi cab, coach, boat, everything is clean and tidy. People clean up after themselves. There isn't, thousands and thousands of tons of rubbish strewn across these cities. It's not tolerated there, it's not promoted there like it is in the UK. We've got something to learn, again, from the way of life in Japan. This is a very, very advanced country with some of the most advanced technology in the world, starting with their transport systems. And rest assured, you could eat your dinner off the floor of their trains. They're clean enough. If you dropped your dinner or your drink on their floor, you could eat it off the floor there. It's that clean. I saw swathes of public workers or public servants out constantly keeping their place clean and tidy, from pruning trees to wiping windows to sweeping the floor. And it was actually a pleasure to be out there and respect their ways and think about. It gave me some ideas as well. For those of you who've been watching me for a while, or those that know me personally, I subscribe, not wholeheartedly, but I lean towards it more, the minimalistic lifestyle, the less is more. Okay, not on everything, but on a lot of things, because I find that gives me clarity, mental, physical and emotional clarity when I go through the less is more stage. And they do that out there. Again, not on everything, but on a lot of things. All right, now, so what can we learn from that, men and women of England, the UK, the USA, Canada and Europe? And that is sometimes go outside of your own country. If you can't travel, at the very least, read about, get to your local bookshop, get to your local library and read something about other people's cultures or other people's ideas or what they think is good for them. Because sometimes what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Yeah, okay, so you can go to another country, read about it, or get your experience, from a friend who's been out there as well, and say to yourself, well, just because it's another country, and I don't speak the language, the eye test will tell you the same. You can read about that country in English. You haven't got to read about it in their own language. So don't be fooled, hoodwinked, or convinced by the country or the town or the city you live in that it's okay to be unhealthy. Yep, I didn't see any women, any girls there from the age of 18 to 60, overweight, covered in tattoos, like a lot of the women are in the UK. Now, that's okay. If a woman of the UK wants to desecrate her body with tattoos, yeah, it's normal. It's been around for hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of years with men around the world. But more and more and more, we're seeing women in the UK, the USA, Canada and Europe cover themselves in tattoos. Now, I actually did some reading up on that a few years ago. And ordinarily, it's okay, it's fine, it's a free country, people can do what they want, that's fine. But if they're covered in tattoos and grossly overweight and smoking or vaping, that's not by accident. That's done deliberately. They've deliberately put themselves in jeopardy with poor health. I didn't see any girls or women out there like that. The men out there were respectful, always had clean clothes on, always had clean shoes. Their hair was always brushed straight. There were some funky looking guys, those that were in the Shibuya or the Ginza district of Tokyo, and that's where all your rock stars and your rap stars and your celebrities go to visit. That's where all your fancy clothing brands. So you can see people with wild hair and wild clothing. That's a fashion thing. But ordinarily, for the most part, I didn't see the men out there with bad clothing, bad hairstyles, overweight, double chins, pot bellies, and covered in tattoos. I didn't see it. All right, and although I've got them myself, that's again given me pause for thought and thought, okay, what can I learn? And I'm going to embrace some of the Japanese way of life by reading up more about it and embracing it. And that definitely is going to be eating. I like my protein food. I like fish, yeah, but actually broadening my tastes as well to eat different types of food, because some of the culinary delights out there were incredible. You have to take my word for it. And again, they were relatively low cost. You could have a few dishes of sushi or tempura for the price of what you'd pay for a McDonald's or a Just Eat or a Deliveroo out here, which is ordinarily highly processed food. So I'd say to you, get yourself a cookbook like the one I got here. And by the looks of it, this thing's going to take me a decade to learn how to cook all the dishes in there, but I'll try with one or two to start with. So there you go. That's just my quick brief eye test and the sights and sounds of an incredible place. And I would urge you to save your pennies or save your yen and get out there and go and visit yourself. Next time you want to have an idea of something you could learn from another country, don't always look to the USA, don't always look to Australia or Europe. Look at the Far East as well, look at the Middle East, whatever it case, but start with Japan. All right, that's it. That's just a quick update on my travels and what I saw. I'm actually going to do another video about what I saw about the people out there, and that's nothing to do with body weight. That's to do with etiquette. All right, my name's Tristan Lowe. The podcast is the Over 40s Fitness Podcast with Tristan Lowe. We're coming towards the end of May 2024 and signing out. Thanks for watching and listening. You can catch me on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. All right, thanks for listening and watching. Bye for now.